Hi there, Chevrolet owners. Today on your 2021 Chevrolet Colorado, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install Redarc's Trailer Brake Controller. This brake controller has all the features of a premium proportional brake controller, but doesn't have the giant mess underneath your dash. With your typical brake controllers, you've got a large control module box and everything's inside that box there, and you mount it here on the lower parts of your dash. And I'm a pretty tall guy. When I'm getting in and out of the vehicle, my knees often bump on those. It messes with my settings, and I'm afraid that sometimes I might bump it and damage the dash here from where it's mounted. With the Redarc system, the control module with the inertia sensor, and that has all the kind of the magic in it on how a brake controller works, can be mounted anywhere inside the vehicle. We were able to hide it behind our dash here, so there's nothing big here sticking out, just the input control knob here, which allows us to adjust the settings for our brake controller. So you can see it as a much smaller footprint, and it looks so much cleaner. This is almost like a factory style look to it. But we can see here that it's blue, and if we were to press in on the knob, you can see that it turns red, showing the amount of output that it's putting out. We can adjust the knob down. You can see that it gets closer to blue the less power it sends out. With blue, we're at 0 being no output, red being maximum output. This is our sensitivity adjustment here. It is a proportional brake controller, which means the harder we press the pedal here in our vehicle, the harder it will apply the brakes on our trailer behind us. This brake controller also has user control mode, which is something similar to time delay. It's their own style, and it's mainly designed for off-road applications. Because in a proportional mode, it uses an inertia sensor inside of the control module to detect the movement of the vehicle. So that when we hit the brakes in this vehicle, it detects that inertia that we're slowing down, and it uses that information to apply the brakes appropriately to match our vehicle. In user control mode, it just applies the brakes after a certain given amount of time to whatever the value is you have it set here. The reason that's good for off-roading is if we hit the brakes in our vehicle here and we slide, it's not going to detect really any inertia because we're not slowing down. We just keep on going. So it's not going to apply the brakes at the back very hard. In user control mode, it doesn't care about the inertia. It's just going to do it after a given amount of time. So that way, when we hit the brakes, it is going to regardless send it back to the brakes on our trailer. So even if we're sliding here, we're going to get the additional stopping power from our trailer to help us come to a safe stop in those muddy off-road conditions. To get into that other mode, you'll simply press down on the pedal and double tap it to make it turn green, and we can double tap it there to bring it back. I usually turn it to 0. It seems to work a little better if you're at 0, because that way it's not going to be applying anything to your brakes at the back when you have it turned all the way down when switching modes. We'll begin our installation by locating our factory wires. They're located underneath this kick panel here, so we'll just take our floor mat out of the way. And then this panel here just pops off. It kind of comes rearward and then up a little bit. So to remove it, it's easiest if you use your trim panel tool. We're going to first get behind the weather stripping here, and then we can get behind the panel once we get behind the weather stripping. And we're just going to work our way down, just kind of popping it along the way, all the way down until we get to the end of the panel. Then we can just slide the panel off and set it aside. And this is where you're going to find your blunt cut wires. They likely do have a piece of electrical tape that wraps around them, so they're going to be a little bit closer. I already pulled that tape off. But you're usually going to just see them kind of like this, and you're looking for the little blunt cut ends there. You may also need to take a little razor knife to trim off some of that tape so you can separate them out so we can work with them. So now that we've got these separated, we can go ahead and figure out where we're going to put our module, because this was the first thing we needed to do, is locate our wires. Our customer previously tried to install a brake controller, and so he already has some pre-existing holes in the dash, so we're going to try to reuse some of those pre-existing holes for the Redarc here, because he was a bit unsuccessful with the installation. So this is where the customer was trying to mount them, so we're going to try to reuse this to salvage this panel. So we're going to remove this panel so we can do that as well. On bottom, there's going to be 2 screws that hold it on, and we'll use a 7mm socket to remove those. And it's a pretty good idea to remove this anyway, even if you're doing this at home, because you're going to need to find a mounting location for your switch. And getting a good look back here, will likely reveal some areas where you could put it. Now that we've got the two screws out, this panel actually just pulls off from there. So you just get your fingers behind the lip here, just kind of pull it towards you. And then just kind of work your fingers around the other side and do the same thing, pulling it towards you. Now that we've got that pulled off, we've got a couple of electrical connectors that we'll need to remove. To remove these, first we're going to take a flat-bladed screwdriver or a little pick and pop out the lock tab here in the center. Then we can press in on the release tab and pull out the connector. We'll do the same thing with the connector over here on the side. It's just on the side instead of angled down. Pop that up. Then you can press in on the release tab and slide it off. Our hood release down here at the bottom, that just slides off right there. If it sticks on you, there is a little tab right here. You just kind of put your screwdriver or something in there, just put a little bit of downward pressure on that center tab. If it doesn't just slide off, that'll help release it from the panel here. So now that we've got this out of our way, then you can take a look at there where we're gonna mount it. It's a good idea to kind of hold this up here and see where you have room, because the switch that comes with the Redarc is a fairly deep switch. This is our switch here. So we can see this is the button that it would stick out beyond our, wherever we mount it, but all this black part here is gonna stick out behind it. So you wanna look to see where you can get this switch mounted. And if we weren't reusing the pre-existing hole here, because if we look over there, we can see that there's kind of some stuff in this location. We're likely gonna need to cut out this section here. I've gone ahead and marked it where we're gonna be cutting to make enough room for this switch. But if I was doing this at home, I would probably put it on this side, because there's a nice big opening here where it's just plastic. You can see down in this slot here that there's nothing behind this plastic. So you could easily take this panel here and you could cut your hole here for your switch and then cut out a hole here in this panel right behind it, and you'd have plenty of room to easily work and get to everything doing that. So that's where I would probably have mounted it. But we're gonna be doing it here. So in order to get it mounted over there, I'm gonna be removing this panel and I'm gonna be trimming that off. So we're gonna remove these bolts here and go ahead and do that. If you are gonna be installing it the same place we are, to remove this panel, you use a 10mm socket. So now we're gonna take off this section here so we can get our switch to fit. You can do this however you like, depending on the tool you've got. We're just going to use some snips to cut it, because it's a fairly thin piece of metal. Next, we're going to go ahead and mount our module to this panel here. I went ahead and just took it, the module here, and stuck it up there before I removed this panel just to see where it would fit. And it's not going to fit on the front side here like this, but I went ahead and sat it on here and marked out the slots there, because where it will fit is on the back side. We're going to end up mounting it like this with some zip ties once we get the panel installed back up in there. We can go ahead and get these holes drilled out now. If you left your panel in because you didn't need to modify this here, you could drill it right in the car, but since we got this out of the car, we're gonna go take it over to the Vise and get these drilled out. Since we're just gonna be mounting this with zip ties, we're gonna use a 1/4 inch drill bit, but it doesn't have to be exact. You just need to be able to fit your zip tie through it. So you can mount this up by just taking some zip ties. If you need some zip ties, you can get some here at eTrailer. And we're just going to be running them through the module, through the holes that we drilled. We'll come back through. Go through our module once again. And then we'll reattach it to that zip tie. Looks like it's gonna be just a little bit too short, but that's no big deal. If it is too short, you can take a second zip tie. You can slide it on one side and slide it on the other to extend that out to make it longer. We're gonna do the same thing in the other hole over here on this side. Once we get all of our zip ties secured, we can snip off any of the excess. And we're now ready to reinstall this panel back into the car. So now we're just gonna set our panel back into place. I'm gonna hold off on putting the hardware back in because we might need to take it down, but I like having it where it's gonna be hanging out so I know where I'm gonna route my wires and how long to route them to. So we can now start by getting the harness routed over to those blunt cut wires. That's gonna be this harness here. So it looks like we're gonna need pretty much every bit of the wire that we've got here in order to get it over there. So we're just gonna start routing the wires towards the blunt cut ones, and then we'll make our connections when we get them routed over there. So now we can go ahead and start making our connections. You can get butt connectors here at eTrailer. We've got various sizes here. We're gonna be using the yellow ones for the thicker wires and the blue for our thinner wires. The wires here that come with the Redarc, the harness, is gonna have a blue, red, white, and a black. We're gonna start by hooking up the power wire, which is the black wire on our harness that comes with our brake controller, and you can see it's labeled there. So we're just gonna slide that off. They come pre-stripped. We'll slide a butt connector on there, and then we're gonna crimp this down. And then this is going to connect to the power wire on our vehicle down here, and that's going to be the red wire with the green stripe. So we can just pull those off of there, cut them off, strip it back, however you need to do it to get this wire exposed. We'll then slide it in to the other end of our butt connector here, and then crimp it down. Once we got this crimped down, we're just gonna repeat this with the remaining wires, getting those connected to our factory ones here. So after getting our power wire connected, we then moved on to the blue wire from our harness. That's gonna connect to the blue wire on our truck here. Next is, and this is our brake output from the controller. Next is the white wire that's on our harness, that's ground. That's gonna connect to the black wire on our truck. And lastly is the red wire on our harness. That's the brake input signal from our vehicle, and that's gonna be the white wire with the blue stripe over on the vehicle here. So now we got those connected, we can take a zip tie and clean up this wiring. We're just gonna zip tie it to this factory harness here to keep everything nice and neat. So now we can go ahead and plug this into our module, and it's easier if you just slide this panel off. So we're just gonna slide that off, plug it in there. We can go ahead and temporarily set this back into place. And now we're gonna get our switch mounted up into our other panel. So now there's a lot of different ways you can mount this switch. You could just drill out the hole here for the switch to pass through and secure it with the nut. But you also get a blank space insert here. And this is nice if you maybe have like a blank button you're wanting to replace or something, or if you have something you want to cover up in your panel, like maybe you didn't make the cleanest cut in your hole there, you can use this to snap this in. This is what we're going to be using that it comes with to help hide all of this. So I've marked this out. So just find the area where you're going to mount it. Again, I would have probably put mine over on this side, but it'll work fine over here. So we're going to go ahead and just cut this out now. And we're going to be using a step bit so we can slowly step that up to make sure we get a good fit for our piece. So I've gone ahead and drilled it out, and the step that we use tops out right at about 7/8 of an inch. And this seems to be a pretty tight fit, which is what we're looking for. We want it to be snug when it gets in there, so we can go ahead and just pop this all the way in. If you can't get it to quite go all the way, because you can see it's got some ears there, we may need to take out just a little bit more material in order to get it to go, which is what it looks like we're gonna need to do. So after enlarging it just a little bit more in order to get it to fully seat up in here, we did have to drill it out to about 1 inch. So now we can go ahead and install our switch. If you chose not to use the insert like we did, after you drill your hole, you would put this little sticker on the panel and then slide your switch through and attach it. If you use this piece here, you don't need the little sticker. We'll then take our switch. It's gonna slide in with kind of it looks like almost like a release tab, but it's not, but it kind of looks like one. That goes towards the bottom. It'll then push through our switch here, our little bezel, and then we can secure it with the clear plastic nut. And you want to just be gentle when tightening down this. It is a plastic nut. It does need to be tight enough to have the switch secured enough for our button to get inserted, but we don't want to go overly tight because again, it's just plastic. It can be pretty easy to damage that nut. That's about as tight as I feel comfortable with it being a plastic nut. So we've got that on there. We want to take our button now, and I like to turn the switch all the way counterclockwise. Counterclockwise is going to have it set to where 0 is at the top. So full counterclockwise turn, put 0 at the top there, and then just push your knob on. There we go, we got 0, 10, 0. If you don't like the positioning, it does just pull right off. You can move it over a notch if you want to. That looks pretty good. That looks like it's a pretty good spot for 0 to be at the top in one direction and 10 to be at the top in the other. You also want to check that your button can press and you hear an audible click. If you don't hear a click, then your nut's likely not tightened down far enough yet to pull your switch all the way through. You might need to snug it down just a little bit more. But if you got a click just like this, your switch is installed. We can go ahead and route our wiring from our switch here to our module and get those plugged together. We'll take the white end of our switch harness. This is going to plug into our switch. So just click, snap those two together. Then the other end of our harness, we're going to route over to our module. So we got this panel still a little bit loose, so we can just slide this off here. Take our switch and then click that into place. We'll then reinsert our panel here. And this is where you can kind of check the routing of your switch wire, just make sure everything looks okay there. We can likely have it pushed back up in there. So at this point, we can sort of test it out. We do want to get the bolts back in here because our module, we can't have our module all loose and moving around. The proportional part of the system won't be able to work if the module's not secure. So we're just going to get these ones in and then tighten these down. Just be careful with your wiring, don't pinch any wires. So now we'll take this panel, we can also reinstall it as well. Make sure you slide your hood latch cable back into place. It just slides on and clicks in, just like that. And then also make sure you plug in any electrical connectors that you may have had to disconnect. And our panels just click together, and we can see there the switch is breathing blue, which means it's powered up. It's not going to do anything else right now because the system needs to be calibrated. In order to calibrate it, you just drive your vehicle like normal. Now when you're driving it, if you don't have a trailer connected, it still will calibrate itself, but you won't really get any feedback from your system here telling you whether or not it's calibrated, finished calibration. If you plug in a trailer and drive around, you'll get some feedback from the switch here. It will flash between blue and green, and you'll see that the intervals that it flashes between blue and green will get faster as it gets closer to being calibrated. And once it's calibrated, it should glow blue for you. So we went ahead and drove the vehicle to get it all calibrated. It did take about 10 start to stop cycles for this one to get calibrated. It is going to vary, and it can take up to 20 start to stop cycles. But once it's done, you'll see here it's solid blue. We have a test box connected, which simulates a trailer. If you don't have a test box, you can just plug your trailer in, because you're not going to get feedback without something connected to your 7-way back there. And if we look at the top right display, that's going to show the voltage going to the trailer brakes on our test box here. And we can increase or decrease that for the adjustment that we need for our particular trailer. And that completes our installation of Redarc's Trailer Brake Controller on our 2021 Chevrolet Colorado.